That explains a great deal.
And I told you,
Somebody
yes. Well, okay.
So my kids have been since and my younger daughter is in high school and is decided.
Good afternoon. Please sit down, finish your conversations. Move to the front if you want to. Okay, this is the routing area open meeting. We are in IETF 95, and this is Buenos Aires. This is us, Aliyah, Deborah, and Alvaro. You can all try that. Alvaro.
Alvaro.
Yeah. Taco, okay. So you've all seen the note well because most of you or many of you chair working groups. So I'm hoping you have already read it. In case you haven't, please read it. There are, this is a page around some of the resources. This is Jabber Room, the routing discussion mailing list, the wiki, et cetera, et cetera. Blue sheets, we're going to pass them in a second so that everyone signs. And nothing. Oh, and this is the agenda for today. We have the normal trivia, agenda bashing, et cetera. We're going to have John Hudson do a RTC technology presentation. He's going to talk about TRILL. We started this last time when Michael and Ines talked about Ripple, about roll, the work and roll. And the idea here is to share a little bit more between all of us what we're actually doing in the routing area. We only have an hour for this meeting, so most of it is going to be taken over by John. Then we're going to go through the working group and the one BOF report. We have 15 minutes and 25 reports. 0.6 minutes per person. Now, so what that means is most of you put the stuff in the wiki. Please don't read everything that's in the wiki. We can all read, or I think we can all read. Summarize what's really important about your working group this week, or what changed, what is really, really exciting. If you're going to tell us what's on the wiki, then maybe just pass, and we'll be happy about that. What we really want is, of course, for the state in there to be accurate. And then, if everything goes right, we're going to have another 5 minutes for any other discussion that anyone wants to have. So anyone want to change the agenda for any reason? Nope. Okay, good. So the area status, it hasn't changed much. We didn't close anything, we didn't recharter anything, and we don't have any new working groups. We did have a BOF this time that we're going to hear from a little bit later. We do have 2 new chairs. If they're here, Martin Stimmerling. Martin? No, Martin's not here. Martin's still the Transport Area Director until tonight. He's took over, or he's one of the new SFC chair with Thomas and Jim. And Peter Vanderstock. Okay, we need to educate the new chairs that they need to come to this meeting, and so we can actually see them. So Peter Benstock is the role co-chair. He replaced Michael Richardson, who decided to take some, to focus more on his individual work.
Okay, and for the routing directorate, we added an additional coordinator. It's Xin Zhang. So Xin, you want to stand up, everybody? Know. So make sure her mails do not go to your spam folders.
Yeah, Shen from Huawei. Please do not block my email. I mean, send the trash can. I mean, also, if you want to learn my name, please talk to me. Thank you.
Okay, and then the director had already sent out some mail that we're going to go to now the round robin way of assigning reviews, because we want to do much more, get the directorate involved in reviews, which is similar to how the other areas are doing it. So the directorate, make sure you didn't put my mail in your spam folder.
Okay, just a reminder of who is responsible for your working group, in case you forgot. Okay, so we're going to go with John's presentation on TRILL. Good luck.
All right, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to hear it. Yeah, actually, it was funny this morning. I actually offered a T-shirt with that on it for someone to scribe, and still didn't get any offers. But this is not going to be a protocol talk, so don't worry. We're going to talk a little bit about what we achieved so far, what went right, what went wrong, and hopefully some lessons that can be learned from this. So, what is TRILL? Well, this guy I know came up with this lovely little comic strip, of which there are two versions, which I'll give you a second to look at it, assuming that any of you can actually read that font, where essentially it's two different perspectives of why end users tended to be a fan of this technology. And one is that if you are from a layer 2 perspective, we got rid of spanning tree and your perception of routing protocols. We broke through the 4096 VLAN limit, and you can build big, giant, flat layer 2 networks and not worry about routing anymore. And if you are a layer 2 person, that was a very exciting opportunity. If, on the other hand, you're a layer 3 guy, hey, we replaced spanning tree with ISIS. Go home and be happy. And this actually got a lot of people very excited. So from those two perspectives, especially if you're managing a data center and you're not just doing networking, you're also managing storage and firewalls and policy and backups and everything else, this made your life easier, which is one of the reasons why it had the adoption rate that it did. Now, what is TRILL functioning? Right? We didn't really go out to achieve a whole lot. We wanted to encapsulate native frames. We wanted to route those encapsulated frames using ISIS. We wanted to decapsulate before it leaves, so essentially it's transparent. And we wanted to do this with the least number of paths, offer equal cost multipathing, and offer as many paths to destinations as possible. So this was a pretty simple initial set of goals. I just, IETF, so I figured I had to include some kind of protocol slide. So, why TRILL? Well, as I said, a lot of this is about removing pain. Another friend of mine created this image for a talk he was doing, so I stole it. In spanning tree's defense, you can usually trace most, nuclear sort of events to user error. It's because people didn't really fundamentally understand how spanning tree worked. However, that doesn't really matter because the whole network still went down. And so for a lot of people, the idea of actually getting spanning tree out of their network and not having to worry about any of the idiosyncrasies or any of the challenges or just the lack of knowledge became a selling feature all into itself. And then you saw this used in a lot of different decks by my current sponsor and others, as far as why you'd want to get rid of spanning tree, not just from a lack of understanding or usage, but also from a throughput point of view. In that the whole concept that imagine if you were driving to work in the morning and you were stuck on a freeway and it was totally jam-packed. And you go online, you find out there's another freeway, like just right next door, and it's empty. And there's like deer on it and the bunny rabbits. And so you call up like, what's that? And they go, oh, that's just the spare road in case, we need it, right? And here you're sitting in traffic 3 miles an hour. And essentially this was the frustration of active passive links. If I have 40 gig, 10 gig, whatever links, I want to use them all. And so being able to go from something like this to something like this usually didn't take a whole lot of explaining. And so this was something that brought a lot of customers, a lot of interest, and a lot of curiosity about how this technology actually worked. Now, what this also resulted in was a ease of use model that became very, very popular. So these are a couple quotes that I gathered from my customers. And the list went on and on and on. I mean, we and this wasn't just my company, we all had this experience where essentially by creating this very, very simple kind of easy bake oven approach to networking, sure, it only, can maybe match that, that standard deviation of customers. If you were trying to do something, too far out of the normal, certainly you didn't have quite as much access to tuning and tweaking. But if you fell into that center stage, it was an easy bake oven, from the point of view of how to set the stuff up. And actually, that final quote I've truncated. It was actually, I'm finishing one day installs by lunch, and the rest of the day I play Call of Duty. But I cut that part out for the benefit of that end user. So now, what worked? Well, we did a couple interesting things. So first of all, we got rid of the 4K VLAN limit. Now, one may ask, why would you want more than 4,000 VLANs? You'd be surprised, and the thing is that the truth of the matter is that no one's trying to do 16 million VLANs, but certainly getting above 4,000, became a very interesting factor for a lot of people, especially to start looking at these mega data centers and these, cloud environments where they really do want to continue to scale in that same framework of number schemes and not have to, start breaking things up just because of some, 4K limit that they weren't even aware of why it existed. What else we did well, and were a couple things. One is active edge devices. To build a nice network and then discover that all of your hosts only have one active uplink to that environment is frustrating as all be. And if you're actually doing any kind of really high throughput, I have customers that do 40 gig out of each desktop. Right? And so being able to, actually have the kind of throughput capabilities that they need, the idea that I have 2 links to a switch and I only am using one of them was wholly frustrating. In fixing it, what we also did was we created a framework that allows for not just 2 active uplinks, but actually significantly more than that. And I'm not familiar with some of the other vendors got to be very honest, but I know that my current sponsor, we ended up getting up to, I think, 8 or perhaps even 16, where you can have, one server with, 8 different active links to 8 different top of rack switches and have them all passing traffic. And if that server is a hypervisor with, 100 VMs on it, you've just provided a tremendous amount of throughput to a lot of very hungry VMs. And so it's a very, very happy thing. Directory assistance, while done a little after the horse got out of the barn, in that the implementations of this in the public space, often got done in a more proprietary way before we actually were able to document it. And so what was documented isn't, exactly what was done by some vendors. But the idea of having a directory structure that could be used for all sorts of things, whether it be something simple like Mac learning, whether it's policy, whether it's setting different security ideas and so forth, it just became kind of a central repository of knowledge that could be shared among those nodes. Needless to say, it does also cause scaling issues. Zero config ISIS is probably, to me, one of the most cool things that this pulled off. ISIS is a beautiful achievement, and it's something that scales very, very well, and most of the community is aware of that. But a significant amount of the community have no idea how to actually manage it, tune it, tweak it, or care and feed for it. And so offering them such a powerful tool in a kind of plug and play zero config way was quite an achievement, and one that a lot of customers became very, very, very hooked on. And then as I've been kind of rallying on for the last 2 slides, removing spanning tree and killing passive links is a very, very good thing. So what didn't go well? Well, if any of you actually braved any of the earlier TRILL meetings, it got ugly. Not that it doesn't get ugly in other working groups, as I've learned. But I have several friends now who I didn't like in the beginning because I only saw how they behaved in the TRILL meeting. And it took me a long time to realize they were actually lovely people, but it was so emotionally charged for so many folks that it made it very, very hard to get any work done. It made it very, very hard to really get any kind of consensus because there was a lot of emotion going on. Vendor interoperability, this, certainly not the fault of the IETF, and it's a little hard to even poke any blame at anyone that was in the working group, but the net result was that the 2 dominant vendors that were actually shipping product do not interoperate with each other or really with anyone else. There are now other vendors that have kind of taken up the flame and are doing some very, very good work with the protocol, and they've implemented quite faithfully. And so that's actually moving forward quite well. But the fact that, you had PugFest going on where not everyone showed up and excuses were made and so forth, by my own sponsor as well. I don't mean to poke blame at others only. This was an unfortunate kind of rollout of the way things went. Some of it was due to the fact that people were releasing product before standards were done. Some of it had to do with the fact that there were people in some companies like my own who didn't really understand how standards work, and so made certain guesses on how things would go and were quite wrong in doing so. But you live and learn. OAM is actually what I think should really be the lesson learned from this. We waited a long time to do OAM in TRILL, and I don't know all the reasons why. And the problem with this is that it left the vendors to essentially come up with OAM methods on their own, which did not go well. And this resulted in either a complete inconsistency of the OAM method or just very poor tuning and troubleshooting capabilities. I just had a very, very large US government customer, who has bought a lot of this stuff, say to me just 2 months ago, I don't understand how I troubleshoot this, and that's sad. Right? It's sad that you have a protocol being released to the public where you don't have all the same screwdrivers and nails and hammers and so forth that you're used to. Now there were some kind of highlights in this. I think Huawei deserves a tremendous amount of credit for the fact that they actually got a unified OAM method for both TRILL and SPB, because there was for a while some kind of weird fighting between the 2 of them, and so creating one OAM method for the 2 was kind of a very elegant way of solving that problem. And so there were a couple little highlights, and we did some good work toward the end with OAM, but we took so long to do it that it really hurt the way OAM was rolled out. And I've had several customers tell me that the reason why they don't like TRILL is because of OAM. Now, honestly, they don't use OAM. Most customers don't even know the term OAM, but what they do know is that they don't know how to troubleshoot it. They don't know how to figure out what goes wrong when it breaks. I mean, true, you could say, well, maybe it doesn't break as often, but whatever, it's a network, it breaks all the time. And so you have to be able to troubleshoot things. You have to be able to figure out where traffic's going and why it's going there. And this is very difficult to do with a technology that doesn't have a strong OAM built for it. So where are we now? We are looking at some traffic engineering. We're looking at a transparent mode option. There was a really cool presentation done this morning by Bob Briscoe on ECN capabilities with TRILL that we're very excited about. And then we are in the process of a rechartering discussion that we'll hopefully start working on figuring out toward this year. And that is essentially the dog and pony show. And I was going to ask for questions, but here you are.
Michael Abrahamson. So you said there was limited success and that PlugFest had problems. So everything is fine and dandy now, or?
Oh no.
Okay, so where can I spent a couple of minutes trying to find some, PlugFest results and the platforms and the software versions and so on that would actually talk to each other, but I was not successful. So do you have any tips in what I should be looking for?
So we're currently doing our best to put together on the wiki what will not be, as full as it should be, list of what we can actually show. There were a couple different PugFests done at David, some by you, right? Yeah. And the thing was that, a lot of the smaller vendors would show up, right? And folks like Huawei and others have implemented a very faithful implementation of it. But unfortunately, for numerous reasons, neither Brocade or Cisco were able to actually participate because of the way it was implemented.
Okay, and when you say the wiki, you're referring to IETF TRILL wiki.
That's our plan, right?
That's one of our to-do options on that.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
Hi, Eric Gray Erickson. May or may not know this, but I had the pleasure of being suckered, got hoodwinked into presenting the TRILL architecture to the IEEE 802.1 group. And
My thanks and my condolences.
yes, condolences, right. One thing to point out is a lot of the things that you're talking about are things that are sort of specific to the routing world. For example, most people who implement VLANs on routers implement no later than 1998 version of 802.1q. And that's part of the reason why some of these things come up. For example, STP is bad in the routing world because they use STP, not RSTP and not MSTP. VLAN, the use of 1998 version of 802.1q doesn't include MSTP, which is the way that you avoid having unused links, because you just do multiple spanning trees and make sure that spanning trees split traffic up over multiple links. Even if you don't like STP, there was work in progress at the time for shortest path bridging. And shortest path bridging has been a standard now for a couple of years. But I don't see the router vendors are going to implement it anytime really soon. So in the routing world, there's a lot of good things about TRILL. And believe me, I'm likely to get horsewhipped by some of my colleagues for saying that. But in presenting this, I got hit with all that stuff. And the other thing is that initially when we started out TRILL, a lot of things were supposed to be zero config. I don't think ISIS is truly zero config, because if you're doing multiple VLANs across it, there's sort of a configuration issue associated with how you do trunking and how you do the distribution of limited scope routing. So for example, there were some bugs or some features that were not supportable with TRILL that included, for example, having multiple links coming into a campus. You had an issue with the notion of a link is only usable by this set of users, that since you're basically advertising all the links in the basic routing protocol, you can't do that. So there was some issues, but again, I agree that it has a lot of value in the routing world. And in the routing world, 450 VLAN is a real thing. In the bridging world, it's not so real anymore. You have many different types of bridging, some of which give you a great deal more than 16 million VLANs. And that's all I wanted to say.
If I can interject a second. Eric, you're right, there's just not enough knowledge and cross-sharing going on. And it would be really great to have more of that information. I know that IEEE has been working hard to come to the IETF and do some of the edu training. And if there's something that might be useful in this space, maybe doing a webinar type of thing that we could talk about, maybe we can share some knowledge and experience. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I will add one thing that, part of the challenge is that vendors tend to pick courses. And so if you are if you like to use vendor X and maybe even a little bit of vendor Y, and they happen to choose SPV, then that's what you learned about and that's what you saw, and you didn't hear much about TRILL. And if the opposite was the case, then you heard all about TRILL and you heard nothing about SPV. And so unfortunately, we can do a lot of really good work here, and IEEE can do a lot of really good work there, but we're still subject to what product managers choose at the vendors to actually then advertise to customers.
Right. To get back to Alia's comment, about 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was, Norm Finn, Don Fedek, Pat Thaler, Janos Farkas, and myself, with some help from other people, put together a tutorial that we gave on a Sunday. It was sort of underattended. It is still available, and it did bring people up to speed on what has been done in 802.1 since 1998.
Can you send a pointer?
I can.
Maybe as a comment to what the routing area can do in the future is shortest path version actually came into the ISIS work group to make sure they weren't stepping on any toes, and that probably should have been socialized better around the IETF.
Well, hey, you've all been very polite and no one's thrown anything, so I appreciate that. And well, I gotta tell you, I mean, I had friends who were like, "You're doing what at what meeting? Like, really?" And so no, but this is good. It was really good feedback, and I mean, the thing is that what happens to this protocol, doesn't really matter at this point. What valuable is that there's some things that went well and there's some things that didn't. And I think everyone as a working group chair can kind of learn from what did go well and what didn't go well, so that hopefully we don't make those same mistakes in the future.
Thank you, John, so much. So we're going to continue in future IETFs with talks similar to this one, so that we all get a better vision of what it is we do in the area. If you have ideas of what you do or other topics that maybe you want to hear here, please let us know. Before we go on, I want to go back to introducing our new chairs. I still don't see Martin, but Peter Vanderstock is sitting over there in the middle of the room. Yeah, there you go. Peter is the new role chair. Yeah.
So while Alvaro gets up the wiki, so that, and he'll pull it up so you can all look at it on your screen so that you feel like you're doing something productive. We're going to go through it. But before we do that, we've switched to the wiki. And unfortunately, I was informed, I'm not sure it's really fair, that there was this little game of whose chairs were going to update the wiki first and get them all in. So being informed and knowing that Deborah likes wine, I have to hand it over. I'm looking forward to chocolate in Berlin.
Okay, so
And you know where we will share.
So we're going to start, we have a little bit more time, but still we have 25 working groups. You all know how to spell and the order of the working group, so please be ready. Babel.
We had a very fruitful discussion on Monday about the Babel protocol and about the work that needs to be done. There were lots of people in the room. There were a goodly number of people who expressed willingness to actually write and to review. And it is now back to the ADs to decide if it is indeed worth having a working group, but there was certainly a lot of interest in the room.
Thank you. Bess.
Still a very lively group, and we are paying beer to anyone who comes tomorrow.
Perfect. BFD.
BFD did not meet. We had a new RFC. Yay. A bunch of our work for BFD is finally coming to some closure. The SBFD stuff is largely percolating its way through the ISG. We have some grammatical feedback that we've been suggested to take care of before we move it along. We have a MIB that is stalled out, which my suspicion is going to just die. We have 2 crypto pieces that are stalled out, and 1 piece that might actually move it forward. For that one, we actually need to spend some time talking to the guys in the security area. The Yang module had made good progress, but stalled out at the moment. New work. We've had some stuff submitted by Jeff Tansura and Greg Mirsky on being able to do BFD on lag between multiple chassis. That's been put out for the working group to take a look at. Lots of BFD stuff happens outside of BFD, and part of our job is to keep an eye on that. Scroll down a little bit further. So BFD for VRRP is something that is continuing to be looked at inside of RTGWG. It's in a unified document at this point, which really is more like two documents have been squished into one. They need to do a bit of cleanup work to actually describe why the two mechanisms make sense and what context they do make sense, because they do cover slightly different scenarios. Scroll down, please. And the other interesting item, and MPLS met earlier this week, there's a BFD directed component which allows for a return path to be specified for a BFD session running on top of MPLS. That work has been stalled out in working group last call on MPLS. If you have comments on that, the responsible AD for MPLS has said, please send more comments. That's it.
Okay, on the beer front, so I won't be too technical. So we have tons of presentation, ideas flying. As long as it doesn't make us a workgroup item, I won't even go there. What's going towards workgroup adoption is the OAM. So we have some OAM framework, which actually looks pretty good. We have a slew of Yang models, but the main Yang model is actually has gone through the doctors, has some serious authors on it, so it looks like it will be adopted. We have a bunch of core drafts which are moving seriously toward last call. We had a pretty good discussion of whether to move beer to proposed standard. What is still missing is security. We had some discussion with Pat and Stephen Farrell, but no one moved the documents forward, so that's kind of the blocking issue. On a less serious front, since we are on track, ahead of schedule, and under budget. Thanks.
C-Camp, we've been super cool in the last months. We have 5 new RFCs. I hope the quality is good enough. Blah, 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 blah. And we had a lot of ping-pong discussion with the BBF, the ITU, and recently we got some informal communication from the ONF. We have a lot of new drafts that are competing with some work that is already been done by the ONF. So this is something that it's going to cause an headache for us for the next months. But we are positive, and we think we are going to manage it. And that's it.
Lou Berger for DetNet. We met earlier this week. We have right now one working group draft that's old, and that was been updated with an additional use case. It's interesting because it's the first machine-to-machine use case. All the others are sort of application-to-application. We also adopted the PS problem statement. That document doesn't really, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But we also figured the work had been done, so we shouldn't lose it. We had a report from a design team, and it's a first draft on data plane alternatives. This is supposed to be a survey document. This isn't a document of we're going to do all these things. Don't read it that way. The next step there is for the folks working on that is to finish their analysis with some sort of summarization of what's there. And from there, we hope to identify the best data plane, and the best being the one that requires the least work to use. Things are moving along. We also expect to have an architecture document not too long. There's a draft out there. If you're interested, read it and tell us what's wrong.
I2RS. This time I decided to put in writing up, I guess between the two chairs, the coin got flipped and I got to write up. So I wanted, people have asked me enough about what is I2RS as a protocol. I decided to put it up on the wiki. You can read it as well as I can, but the whole point is we are a first of a reuse protocol. We're trying to reuse other protocols, so our process is a bit different and we are learning. If there are other people who've done reuse protocols, do come talk to me. I want to know if you do the process better than I do. We, in 2015, wrapped up the working group's problem architecture, potential to use, security environment, protocol, strawman. At least we got most of it in our base protocols. And now we're just sort of running through the crank to make sure we've got all the requirements nailed down. So that was this last period. We did get through our architecture and problem statement. Our ISG team got us through the approval, and we're hoping that we can turn the crank and send out the requirements in the protocol strawman and hand it over to NetConf and NetMod to make sure that everything looks good and come out with the final protocol. Then we'll send in our models. We hope this is one of those, gee, we get the first version done and go into hiatus. This time we had a fairly active participation in the hackathon. The Yang push, which is coming from the I2RS pub sub, was actually hacked and showed that it did a lot of its options. It's in the ODL code. The other thing we were hacking is how to put add and delete routes to the RIB. We hope to have a sort of complete set at the next hackathon. So hopefully what that'll do is to give operators a chance to play with it. And then when they think of good ideas, they can start out with a open source code and a toy Quagga implementation or a toy filter thing like your Linux snap. So that's R2S. I'm just going to go on to IDR, unless you want to come up, John. Nope. Okay. Again, I tried a new, hopefully less boring slide set. IDR is always fun because it's the longest, maybe running protocol, but it seems to be everything for everyone right now. Good, better, and different. We are going forward with that. In other words, I don't want to talk about if you're going to what's right to put in BGP or what's not. The place where we claimed that Shakespeare was going to be put in BGP is long past. If you want to talk about that, see me after and bring beer or fine wine. But right now we're looking at protecting BGP against bogus things, route leaks or migration to detection. We had an awesome first contributor who stood up at his first ITF, brought in his first draft, and will probably send it into working group adoption. Awesome. We also have a lot of updates to things which have become familiar: link state in BGP, segment routing in BGP, new communities in AdPass. So we have a whole lot of extensions. We're still working on tunnel de jour, so there'll be a lot of work on that. BGP carrying of tunnel endpoints and information, just as long as, yes, I do know for the L2 VPN folks, you did it first. And then policy in BGP, we are redoing the flow spec RC5575. Option 1 is the denial of service attack option, where we'll extend it. And then based on what I've heard from SDN and NFV providers, we'll probably go ahead with doing a new NRI. The two things will be side by side. The IDR mantra, don't break it, keep it working. And it will have a new NRI and probably a BGP-wide community. We'll finalize that. And again, we're also putting TE topology. And we've had some really, really new, you have to go down, point down on it. We've had some really interesting new stuff coming out of the Facebook folks for new aids for the data center. That's it.
Okay, Chris is live.
Chris, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. We are not meeting this time. Both of the chairs are missing, but we are moving work right along. As you can see, we've got 3 new RFCs. We have 3 drafts submitted to the ISG, and those are all going through, it seems like. And we have 3 drafts in working group last call. We have one that's the ISIS encapsulation cap is still being argued. So if you have opinions on that one, you should come in. It seems to be going back and forth now a lot. Something it's pretty noteworthy, I guess, is that we have declined as working group to adopt the flow spec work. The decision was that it could be done better with, or more appropriately, in things like netconf yang, as it really kind of was just configuring your routers with flow spec information. The only other thing probably worth mentioning is that we're going to try to push the sort of buried in the new IDs there, Ginsburg ISIS MI BIS. This is a change to a published standard in an incompatible way, so it's definitely worth looking at. It's not a huge incompatibility, even one implementation of the spec by one large vendor does it the new way, which is basically allowing multiple instances of ISIS to have multi-topology in them. The original spec did not allow that. And that's a use case that's needed. So I think that pretty much covers everything. And we will meet in Berlin.
Thanks, Chris. LTPX. You want to?
Sorry, I thought my co-chair was here. The good news is that all of the blocks on the proposed charter have been cleared, and I believe the proposed new charter for LISP has been sent for external review, which is great. We'll be meeting later in the week to go over things that we need to move forward to PS. Our big focus will be moving the existing protocols from experimental to PS, with changes if we find there were issues from the deployments or from people's experience. It's not got to just move them rock and stock and barrel. In fact, we expect to do a fairly good rewrite on the base protocol spec to improve readability.
Okay, and just on L2TP, they didn't meet. They're still busy with a couple of documents, and especially the BFD one now is ready to go, as we've had in the BFD associated documents are going, and they're continuing just to plow ahead to try to finish up.
Mane, we didn't meet here in Buenos Aires either. We have cleared all but one of our remaining work items. We're all trying to work on that, and we've agreed that we're going to get it done before our grandchildren have to pick it up. And that's about it.
So MPL has met this morning. We had a somewhat less than normal level of dispute in the group, but there was a lively discussion around RFC 3107 BIS, which has 3 errata against it, and there are a number of other under specification things. But the big discussion was that there are things that at least the authors of the draft believe are incorrect implementations out there, and is it possible to accommodate them, or should we throw it up and just do the whole thing right? And that's kind of gone back and forth, and I think there's probably a reasonable compromise that can get worked out using capabilities. We had another nice discussion from Deborah, which you heard about from Jeff, concerning a draft that has too much silence and a little bit of controversy. So we need more people to speak up and make their opinions known on that. And the last is, there are 2 drafts on RSVP-TE scalability, midpoint scalability, and I'm kind of really proud that this is a problem, because nobody ever thought 18 years ago that we'd have anywhere near 500,000 endpoints, which is kind of the bar that people have set. Midpoints. That's it.
Refresh it. NVO3 has built in it. NVO3. So Benson has to be in IANA because of his other hat. NVO3 met. We're working on getting the working group to finish this year. Plans to do some interoperability or encourage some interoperability events, working on OAM, and that's most of it. The rest you can read.
AC Lindem, Cisco Systems. I'll let you just read these. The notable is the extension, is the prefix link attributes. I see I must have not did something funky in the XML markup. That one makes OSPF v2 fully extendable with TLVs. So, and we have a lot of implementations. What really drove that was the segment routing. And that's the other thing that we're hoping to working group last call before the next IETF. There's a few things I wanted to discuss in that. There's a few things in there that are not implemented by, I don't think they're implemented by everybody, but we have a lot of implementations of the majority of it. And they've done some interoperability testing. So that will be huge if we get the other thing is for OSPF v3 for the fully TLV-based LSAs. And also, we're hoping to get some implementation traction. And I've heard rumors of it, so I'm pretty excited. I'm going to try and I'll bring a bottle of wine for the first implementation, or whatever. What's in Berlin? I guess there's beer in Berlin and brats. The other thing that we're done, we have sent to ALIA the experimental TTZ draft. The engineers at Huawei did a prototype and did a demo, and it works. There wasn't really complete agreement as to how much advantage it would be, and so it's an experimental. So I'd encourage people to look at that, but we're going forward with publication. And those are the three main things. There's the Yang model, we're waiting on the op state, like all the other Yang models. Thanks.
Everything's up there. I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
John Hoddock for PCE. We are making good progress with stable PCE. That draft's almost ready to go to the IESG, and some related drafts that depend on that. We got PSAP over TLS through working group last call, so we can secure PSAP now, which is good. We just met this afternoon in the PCE working group. We also had a joint meeting with TEAS and MPLS to discuss Yang yesterday. That was very useful, highly productive, and I encourage more joint meetings for Yang discussion. And our agenda today was packed with loads of new work items, lots of new work coming into PCE, which is great to see. That's it.
Yeah, hi. So in PIM, we finally got the sparse mode spec published as internet standard. So that's something that only took like 4 years. So I'm glad to be done with that. The main thing I want to mention is maybe Yang. So we have a pretty complete Yang model for PIM now, and also working on one for IGMP and MLD. We could need some more review though of people outside the working group, maybe some Yang experts. And looks like we're also waiting for Yang models for routing and BFD and ACL policy to kind of, well, converge or stabilize, or maybe be published so that we can be sure that whatever we do in the PIM model kind of fits in with that. So we're sort of in a holding pattern a little bit. Otherwise, the working group is fairly active, lots of drafts, but we're having some issues with low participation, sort of like people work on their own drafts, but not that much, caring about other drafts. So trying to figure out how to improve on that.
Hi, from ROR, we met yesterday. From our work events, we have one in last call, and the other one we are getting reviewers. Additionally, we have new work that are not part of the current charter, so we are evaluating if we have to recharter and include the new work that some of them has support of the working group. Thank you.
RTGWG is meeting Thursday and Friday. And the highlights are that we have, we're discussing IPv6 multi-homing with provider-assigned addressing. So far, our work has been motivated by HomeNet, but we got a request from V6 Ops to look at applying this to more general enterprise networks. And so we're having a fairly lively discussion going regarding using source prefixes in and together with destination routing. The other main topics are we have several Yang models, and mainly we're looking for some advice from the Yang design team about, as AC mentioned, the impact of op-state and or schema mount on those Yang models and how we should proceed with them or wait. In addition, for sort of more traditional RTGWG work, we have 2 drafts on microloop avoidance techniques which are being implemented, and we're incorporating feedback on those implementations. Thanks.
SFC.
SFC met. Martin is busy handling his last working group as transport AD, so tragically couldn't be here. They had a good discussion about security environment, but not a lot of conclusions. Happy to see that getting traction. Or sorry, happy to see that being discussed, would like to see it getting more traction and improved. NSH is in working group last call, and the rest you can read.
Sandy Murphy reporting for CIDR. We had a session Monday, and we also had a session just prior to this session. We had one RFC published. We've had several documents go through, 2 documents go through working group last call, 1 adoption call, a couple of drafts that are long past working group last call, but had issues related to other drafts. So thought that I was going to get publication requests out for a couple of them, but things turned up today that may delay a couple of those. Part of the Monday meeting had to do with a new transport protocol, some experience from RIPE, information about how they do their implementation of validation. If this were a protocol, it would have been sort of a implementation applicability sort of report, but so it's information about just their implementation. Today we had other people step up asking for working group adoption. One from D6 that talked about how they use route servers and a community to signal the origin validation state. This is something that AMSIX has also done. Talked about, someone from Costa Rica spoke about their deployment. Someone suggested a new working group draft that collected all the requirements into one draft instead of having in one place instead of having it spread all over. And someone talking about the deployment experiences in China. That one also requested working group adoption, but some of the issues that they identified and their suggested solutions. Their issues have already been addressed or brought to the attention of the working group, and there are drafts in progress to address those issues. So I'm not exactly certain what's going to happen with that draft. We'll see how the adoption call goes for those 3 today. Most interestingly, we were asked by our routing AD to discuss 2 matters, which led to a pretty lively and involved discussion at the last 45 minutes. One was about the BGPsec protocol. Just finished a working group last call. That's kind of the last thing from the charter to get done, but we have other things already on the books to do. What's the future of the working group? Does it still belong in routing? Do we just finish it up in routing? Lots of discussion about that. And then a discussion about whether or not the BGPsec protocol should be experimental or standard. And Alvaro took a hum, and I heard no clear consensus from the hum. He can speak if he did. So the mailing list and the next meeting should be very interesting.
Okay, so we met already for spring. We had, I thought, a fairly productive meeting, especially on the existing work front. There's a draft on segment routing conflict resolution, which has to do with figuring out what to do when you've got conflicting SIDs. And there was a long and I thought productive discussion in the meeting, because I already said productive once. So we're expecting an O1 to come out next week, and we'll start an adoption call for it. We also, it turns out that you can use Spring for a lot of things, and people like to bring us drafts about it. And we did hear a number of them, and they were interesting, but we are trying to manage the group to actually, do our chartered things first. So what you see on the short-term work plan is trying to drive through the rest of the use case documents that we have in the group, and hopefully, the chairs keep saying this, but be done with them, sometime this year. It would be really great to be done with them at the next meeting. And that will free us to then start moving through the architecture document and so on. That's about it.
Pawan Biram for TEAS. We met for our regular session on Monday. We also had a joint Yang session with PCE, MPLS, and CCAMP. It was a bit of a challenge seating all the co-chairs in one tight corner. We pulled it off. In terms of highlights, we did have a virtual interim early this year. The focus was on progressing RCP ingress and egress protection drafts. The conclusions from the meeting are listed up here for your reading. The data models that we adopted as working group work items are progressing well. There's still a fair bit of work that needs to be done, but they seem to be heading in the right direction. In terms of document status, we had 2 new RFCs, 1 in the ATS queue, and I believe 2 in ISG processing. That's all I have. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Donald wasn't here. Donald, I said, John, you didn't want to do it? Oh, okay. I thought you'd be seated. Sorry. Okay. TRILL's making great progress. John went through everything in the previous slide. That's all I need to talk about. Bye.
So we still have, thank you everyone for the reports, for filling out the wiki. We have 2 minutes left if anyone has any other business. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. You didn't have to do that.
Of course I have to write that. It's good for the area and the chairs. Okay.
Yeah, they liked it. They liked it. 'Cause-
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel.
Yeah, we have we have the whiskey working group, right, our informal group.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We met last night, and then, so we're not meeting tonight, but tomorrow night I'll bring it up. We can all share, because everybody's there.
Yeah. No, it's.
Yeah, it's really because they really,
Right?
So maybe next time we're gonna get, the other